So this morning I find myself at Trinity College with a couple of absentees, so I've got time to do a little video which I thought might be of help. Someone asked me the other day how the vocal folds, which can only vibrate at one particular frequency at any one time, can create a whole range of frequencies, which are the harmonics, because everywhere she was being told that the harmonics are created by the vocal folds, and she didn't understand how something which can only vibrate at one frequency can generate a whole range of frequencies within the sound spectrum. So I put together a few thoughts that might explain this. So if you allow me to share the screen, we have the vocal folds here, and we know that they can only vibrate at one particular frequency, one particular fundamental frequency at any one time. These then are resonated within the vocal tract depending on the position of the articulators, and the resonated sound is emitted as a radiated spectrum there. So I'm going to clear those drawings and stop sharing this screen, and instead I'm going to share this screen. This is an application called Audacity, which some of you may well know. It's a sound editing suite, but it also has some quite nice analytical tools which will allow me to explain a few things about sounds. So, what I want to do first is have a little look at what I've pre-prepared here. Here we've got a recorded track, a sound wave if you like, and that's just a pure sine curve at 220 Hertz. That's preset up by me. If I play you that, I'll click it as solo, so I mute anything that's below, go to the beginning of the track, and I can play that. That's what a pure sine wave sounds like. And it's really not a very interesting sound, is it? It's quite mellow, but it has not a lot to say for it as a musical sound. What I'm going to do, I've got a blank track here underneath it, and in there I can generate a sound. So I'm going to generate a tone. This time I'm going to generate it at twice the frequency, not 220 Hertz, but 440 Hertz, a slightly smaller amplitude. For amplitude is the loudness of the sound, if you like. So, I'm going to take 5 seconds there, and now in there I've got something which should be twice the frequency of this one here. If I look at that, I'm going to select those two so that they become clear. There, I've selected on top one cycle there, and if you look here, in the same time, I've got 2 cycles. That's what you expect from a sound which is twice the frequency. If I play this one now, put that one onto solo, and go to the beginning of the track. The same rather bland sound, same rather bland tone, but an octave higher. Might seem a little bit random that I've chosen these 2 frequencies. They are 440, which is the one that we're on here. Sorry, I've lost the cursor. There, this one. 440 is the concert pitch for that an orchestra tunes to. So, what I also want you to show you here is that Audacity has the ability to analyze curves. So, within this, if I analyze this, I ask it to plot the spectrum. There's only one frequency in there. We expect it to plot a spectrum with just one frequency shown. So here we have 220 Hertz, one pitch. If I do the same thing for the pitch below, again, just one frequency in there. Analyze, plot spectrum. there it is. There's that one peak in the spectral plot, 440 hertz. What I can do also with Audacity is to mix tracks, so I can blend two tracks together. And then I'm going to ask it to render, to create that the new sound into a new track, and it conveniently puts it just here underneath. So in this spectrum, in this track, we should have two pitches. And if I were to play that one, I'll go back to the beginning of that one actually and play it to you. Not a very pretty sound, but it's got less, it's less bland than the previous one. It is the same as if I were to play these two simultaneously. All the others, I've muted all the other ones and left these two to play. So the top two played together, exactly the same sound as this track, which has those two, this track here, which has the two blended in. If I now analyze this track, there should be two frequencies in the spectral plot. Here we've got the two peaks, 220 hertz and 440 hertz. You'll notice that this one's a little bit lower. That's because I chose an amplitude that was a little bit smaller. It doesn't look as if it's much lower, but the scale here for the loudness is a decibel scale, and a little drop there represents quite a substantial reduction in amplitude. I'm going to close this. What I want to show you now is that down here, I want you to have a look at the periodicity of these curves. This one here recurs after this amount of time. Here, in that same amount of time, we've got two cycles. But this one, which has a different shape now because it's got multiple frequencies within it, recurs with the same periodicity as the top track. Because it recurs with the same periodicity as the top track, we can say that it's got the same frequency. So this one has the same frequency as this one, even though inside this track we can decompose it into multiple frequencies, one of them with the same frequency as that one, and one of them with the same frequency as that. We say that it's got the same frequency overall as the top track. And certainly if we play the top track again, and this one, it's got, sorry, that was the top track again. It's got the same frequency, it's got the same pitch as the top track. So what we've seen is that a sound doesn't need to be a pure sine wave in order to have a pitch, a defined pitch, or indeed to have a defined frequency. It can have other constituent frequencies within it. I'm going to close this one that I generated there. I'm also going to close this one here, and I'm going to show you just as a little trick. This was pre-prepared beforehand. I've got 220 hertz at the top and 660 hertz in the second track. If I blend those two together, track, mix and render, the resulting track is like that. I'm going to reverse what I've just done. I'm now going to add a third one, which is 1100 hertz. If I mix those ones, it's slowly beginning to look rather squarer. And that's not an accident. I'm going to reverse what I've just done there, and I'm going to do the fourth one. This is now adding a frequency higher still. The frequencies I've chosen are 3 times, a fundamental 3 times, 5 times, and this new one is 7 times the frequency. If I mix those, I'm going to mix these and create them in a new track below. They're getting more and more like a square wave. That's not an accident. I chose these frequencies and amplitudes to create a square wave. The way Audacity analyzes a sound is a process called Fourier analysis. It's a mathematical process. We don't need to know about it. We do it by, as singers, do it by listening and hearing and feeling, appreciating what tones are. But there is a mathematical process which allows any repeated curve, such as this one, that pattern is now can be repeated, and it's repeated there, it's repeated there. So it's a repeated pattern. Any repeated pattern like that can be analyzed and broken down into a set of frequencies, which are pure sine curves. Okay, so if I analyze this one, I'm going to just take a little bit more sound for the analysis. If I analyze that one, Zoom is doing something rather funny there for me. Sorry for the delay. I'm going to plot that spectrum. Within that spectrum, we've got 4 spectral peaks. That's what we expect, because we know we've generated this curve from 4 sounds, 4 pure sine curves. Fourier analysis generates a spectral plot, but we could also take the spectrum and recreate the original curve. That's the way it works. So any repeated pattern can be broken down into a set of sounds, pure sine curves, and those pure sine curves would appear in a spectral plot, and a spectral plot can then be used to regenerate the original sounds. Just to show that this is a sine, a square, the first 4 terms in a, yeah, I should explain that. We've got Fourier analysis will break something down into a set of harmonics, if you like, and if I start with a square wave, it would give me many harmonics, and I've only chosen the first 4 terms here, the first 4 harmonics. Right, I could carry on. This was to 7 times the frequency. I could carry on to 9 times, 11 times, and this would get closer and closer to a square wave. I'm going to create a new track at the bottom. There it is. And at the beginning of that track, I'm going to generate a tone. This time, I'm not going to choose a sine curve. I'm going to choose a square wave. And I'm going to choose the same frequency that I started off with at the beginning. And there we are. Let's have a little look at those there. So we see here that we've got something which looks like the beginnings of a square wave. Okay, when I analyzed those, we found 4 terms. What happens if I analyze the square wave? There we are. Analyze that. There's a plot the spectrum. Well, we've got all these, the first 4, rather like we had before, but also all these ones down here added on top. And those ones are what make it a perfect square wave, as opposed to the one that I had, which was the first 4 terms only. So I'm going to close that, and I want to go back. I want to stop sharing this, and I want to discuss a little bit that screen again. So with that screen, above the vocal folds here, we get a changing pressure, because coming up, we've got the air flowing from the lungs, passing the vocal folds themselves, and the vocal folds are opening and closing. So they're allowing the pressure, the air from below to come through, allowing the pressure above the vocal folds to build, and then they close. So they open, the air comes through, and then they close. So you might think that this would create a pure sine pressure, a pressure curve, which was a pure sine curve. So forgive my drawing; it's not very easy on a screen like that. But if that's the case, here's where the pressure's building when the vocal folds are open, but at this time the vocal folds are closed. Well, if they're closed, the pressure can't carry on dropping, so that must be a horizontal line. Then the pressure builds again until whilst the vocal folds are open for the next time, and then we get a horizontal line again. So I'm going to clear those drawings, and the pressure curve that I expect here isn't a pure sine curve. It's flat when the vocal folds are closed, something which builds and drops when the vocal folds are open, and then flat again for the next cycle of when the vocal folds are closed, and then something rising again during the next cycle of opening, then something during the next cycle of closure. Okay, so I'm going to clear those drawings, and let's have a think about what that means to the when the pressure changes above the vocal folds following this rule. Let's have a think about what that means for the sounds that are available to be resonated within the vocal tract. I'm going to clear the drawings and stop sharing this, and I'm going to go back to Audacity, and this time I've got a pre-prepared slide here, again with 220 hertz, and the same frequency, 220 hertz, but this time the curve goes up and down and then level, up and down and then level, rather like we suggested with the vocal folds opening and closing. So if I'm going to zoom out a little bit there and play the top sound, that's what you expect, that rather bland sound. Again, if I analyze that one, you know now what to expect in there. Analyze, plot spectrum. We've just got one peak in the spectral plot at 220 hertz. Okay, now the lower one, even though each peak is a perfect sine curve, has a flat bit at the bottom. So what happens if I analyze that? I plot the spectrum. Now we've got lots and lots of spectral peaks. We've got one as expected at 220 hertz. Why is it expected? Because the pattern does recur every 220 times a second. Its frequency, its basic frequency is 220 hertz. You've also got one there at 400 and something hertz. You've got one there at 800 and something hertz, etc. So suddenly we've got lots and lots and lots of peaks. So if I wanted to generate a curve like this, I would have to add together lots and lots of different frequencies. Equally, if I go back to the vocal fold picture, the vocal tract picture, because this has this particular shape, we know that within that there are effectively lots of other frequencies being generated. So the vocal folds are not generating a pure sine curve. They are generating a sine curve in the pressure above, but also a whole range of frequencies, which are the harmonics. The vocal folds aren't good at creating a pure sound. They are not designed to create a pure sound. In vibrating, they create lots and lots of frequencies, but they aren't creating a different note. Those frequencies belong to a rule. They are harmonics. They are simple multiples of the fundamental. They all come together to create a sound, the sound source for the voice. That means we've got a rich array of different frequencies, some of which can be resonated in the vocal tract, depending upon the articulation used. So if we change the articulation, different harmonics are favoured. Some of them will be favoured if the back of the tongue is back of the mouth is closed and the front is open. Others will be favoured if we close the lips a little bit. We've got the means to create different tones. We've got the means to radiate different sounds, the different vowels. So I'm going to clear those drawings again in case I choose to come back. So we've got the means to create different vowels. And that's the answer to the question I was asked. How can the vocal folds create multiple frequencies when we know they can only vibrate at one frequency? That statement is a little bit limiting. They can only vibrate at one fundamental frequency. Within that fundamental frequency, we have a lot of harmonics as well. They cannot vibrate without generating harmonics. There is just one little thing that I wanted to show you as well, and this is quirky, really. It's got nothing to do with what I've just been talking about, but I heard it talked about on the Voice Geeks forum earlier in the year, and I thought I might just show this. If I analyze the lower spectrum here again there, dot spectrum analyze, we've got the 220 hertz. We've got twice that, 440 hertz. We haven't got 3 times that at 660 hertz. That's a sort of missing peak. But at the next one, at 880 is there. There's another missing peak at 110. The 1320 is there. It seems that there are in here peaks which are missing. There's a peak missing here, there's a peak missing here, there's a peak missing here, there's a peak missing here. In fact, you can see, because my drawing wasn't perfect, we're slowly getting these missing peaks showing. But it does seem that alternate harmonics are missing in this rather strange, if I close that, in this rather strange shaped sound curve. That would suggest that this can't be the sound source shape for the voice, because we know that the radiated spectrum has all harmonics available. There aren't missing harmonics. And the reason for that is simple, but It's deceptively simple. If we look at this curve here, I've cut that in half just to show you that what happens on this side is a sort of reflection of what happens on the other side. This curve is symmetrical about this position. It's equally symmetrical about that position. So what happens to the left and right of that line? And that means that within this spectrum, within that plot, you can only have the frequencies which share the same symmetries. So some frequencies are forbidden. In order to have all the harmonics, what we would have to have would be some kind of asymmetry. And what happens here in the actual life is you get a plot which looks more like that. So it is no longer symmetrical. There it seems to be above the vocal folds a slower build-up and then a sudden shutting down. The vocal folds open elastically and then they don't just close elastically again. If they did, we'd get this symmetrical pattern. But here, they're actually being pulled together by the Bernoulli effect, by a reduction of pressure as the air is flowing up. So they're going to get pushed apart by the air blowing up, and then they snap shut. Pushed apart for the next cycle and snap shut. That has broken the symmetry, and if instead of having this pattern, I was to have something which was regularly repeating but slightly asymmetrical like that, we would have a spectral plot which had all the possible harmonics in it. So that's another little question that I thought I'd answer in case someone wanted to know why, if we had this pattern here, which seems pretty obvious, do we miss various harmonics in the spectral plot? I hope that's been interesting. I hope that's helped. And if anyone has any other questions, do feel free to ask and I'll answer if I can. Thank you. Bye-bye.